I always believed the dark bruises on my ribs were from my own clumsiness, just like my stepmother insisted. But when my doctor called me at midnight, his voice shaking, everything changed. He had run the tests 3 times to be sure. The toxins in my blood proved those violent beatings after dinner were not discipline. They were her way of forcing the poison down my throat, and now I finally had the proof to destroy her. My name is Everly Richards, and for 28 years, I believed that data was the only thing in the world incapable of lying. People lied. My stepmother lied. Even my own body seemed to lie to me, bruising at the slightest touch, aching when it should have been strong. But numbers? Numbers were pure. They were the cold, hard bedrock of reality. That was why I sat in the sterile, hum-controlled environment of the server room at Hemisphere Analytics in Port Aurora, Colorado, at 9 in the evening. The blue light of the monitors washed over my face, reflecting rows of genomic sequences and blood panel algorithms. I was safe here, or so I thought. The silence of the lab was shattered by the vibration of my phone against the metal desk. The screen lit up with a name I knew well, but rarely saw flashing at this hour: Mason Hale. He was an internist, a brilliant mind I had known since my university days, and one of the few people I trusted to handle my own medical files. I answered, expecting a casual check-in or perhaps a question about the new predictive modeling software we were rolling out to his clinic. Everly, his voice was tight, stripped of its usual warmth. It was the voice of a doctor standing over a crashing patient. "Are you alone?" "Yes," I said, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. A cold prickle of unease danced down my spine. "I am at the office. Mason, what is wrong? You sound like you have seen a ghost." "I have run the samples 3 times, he said, and I could hear the rustle of paper, the frantic clicking of a mouse in the background. I did not want to believe the first readout. I thought it was a calibration error in the spectrometer, but I calibrated it again. Then I ran it a 3rd time on a different machine entirely. Everly, the result is identical every single time. This is not a mistake." "What result?" I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper. I instinctively wrapped my free arm around my ribcage, wincing as my fingers brushed against the tender, swollen flesh beneath my silk blouse. "You need to come here," Mason said. "Now, do not go home. Do not go anywhere else. Come straight to the clinic. I have unlocked the back entrance for you." "Mason, it is snowing heavily. Can this not wait until morning?" "No," he snapped, the urgency in his tone cutting through my hesitation like a scalpel. "If you wait until morning, the levels might drop, and we would lose the acute timeline. Or worse, you might ingest more of it. Just get in the car. Everly, please." The line went dead. I sat there for a moment, the hum of the servers suddenly sounding like a swarm of angry hornets. I looked down at my side, even through the fabric of my shirt and the structure of my blazer. I could feel the heat radiating from the bruise on my left flank. It was a deep, throbbing ache that had become my constant companion over the last few weeks since I had returned home to care for my father. I told myself it was from the gym. I told myself I had been pushing too hard on the deadlifts. I told myself I was clumsy, bumping into counters and door frames. That was what Monica always said. "You are so careless with your body. Everly, you bruise like a peach because you do not respect your physical form." I grabbed my coat and headed out into the biting Colorado night. The drive to Mason's clinic was a white-knuckled nightmare. The snow was coming down in thick, heavy sheets, reducing visibility to almost zero. My windshield wipers slapped frantically against the glass, a rhythmic thudding that synced with the pounding of my heart. Every time the car jolted over a patch of black ice, a sharp bolt of pain shot through my side, stealing my breath. I gripped the steering wheel tight, my knuckles turning white. In the isolation of the car, with nothing but the high beams cutting through the swirling white darkness, the memories I usually kept locked behind mental firewalls began to leak out. I could hear Monica's voice, sweet and cloying like rotten syrup. "Mom only does this to keep you healthy. Everly." I remembered the dinner 2 nights ago. The green sludge she called a detox smoothie. The way it tasted bitter, metallic, like sucking on a penny. I had tried to push it away. I had told her I was full. Then came the flash of movement, the sharp intake of breath, the impact. It was never a slap to the face. Monica was too smart for that. Faces showed marks that neighbors could see. No, she aimed for the soft tissue, the stomach, the kidneys, the ribs, places that could be hidden under clothes, places that ached deeply but told no secrets to the outside world. "You have to finish it," she had whispered, rubbing my shoulder immediately after driving her fist into my side. "It is for your father. Do you want him to worry? Do you want his heart to give out because his daughter is too stubborn to take her medicine? Drink it." And I had drunk it. I had swallowed every drop through my tears, the pain in my ribs pulsing in time with my swallowing, just to make her stop, just to keep the peace, just to protect my father, who was sleeping upstairs, oblivious to the war being waged in his own kitchen. I shook my head, forcing the memory away as I pulled into the empty lot of the medical center. The building loomed dark and silent against the snow, save for a single light burning in the corner office on the second floor. I entered through the back door as instructed. The hallway smelled of antiseptic and floor wax. My heels clicked loudly on the linoleum, the sound echoing like gunshots in the empty corridor. Mason was waiting for me. He looked exhausted, his tie loosened, his hair messy as if he had been running his hands through it repeatedly. He did not smile when I walked in. He did not offer me coffee. He simply gestured to the chair in front of his multiple monitors. "Sit down," he said. I sat, keeping my coat on, wrapping it tight around me as armor. "You are scaring me. Mason, is it leukemia? Is it an autoimmune disorder? I know my white blood cell count was a little off last year, but—" "It is not leukemia," Mason interrupted. He turned one of the monitors toward me. It displayed a complex line graph, jagged peaks and valleys plotted against a timeline. "Everly, look at this. This is the spectrometry analysis of the blood sample you gave me yesterday morning." I leaned in, my data analyst brain automatically engaging. I looked for patterns. I looked for anomalies, and I found them instantly. "What is this compound?" I asked, pointing to a recurring spike that appeared with terrifying regularity. "It has a molecular weight similar to warfarin, but the binding structure is different, more aggressive." "That," Mason said, his voice grim, "is a superwarfarin. It is a long-acting anticoagulant. Specifically, it is a compound mostly found in commercial-grade rodenticide, rat poison, Everly, and this second spike here, this lower, more subtle curve, that is a localized paralytic agent, usually derived from monkshood, but synthesized. It creates muscle weakness, compliance, and lethargy." The air left the room. I stared at the screen, the lines blurring slightly. "Rat poison?" I laughed, a dry, brittle sound that cracked in the quiet room. "Mason, that is ridiculous. I have not been near any pest control chemicals. Maybe it is an environmental contaminant at the old house. Dad has those old pipes." "Stop," Mason said gently. He reached out and tapped the keyboard. The graph shifted, overlaying a new set of data points. Time of day. "I mapped the concentration levels against your metabolic rate. Look at the peaks. Here, here, and here." I followed his finger. 7 in the evening, 7:15 in the evening, 7:30 in the evening. Every single spike initiated exactly 2 to 3 hours after dinner time. "This is not environmental," Mason said, looking me dead in the eye. "This is ingested, oral administration, high dosage, and it is happening like clockwork, every night. Something enters your system that thins your blood to a dangerous level and introduces a toxin meant to weaken your heart muscle." "It must be the supplements," I stammered, my mind racing to find a logical, safe explanation. Desperation clawed at my throat. I did not want to look at the truth. I wanted to look at anything else. "Monica. She is obsessed with these new herbal blends. She imports them. She says they are for cleansing the liver. She probably just bought a bad batch. Supplements are not FDA regulated. You know that. It is just a mistake. A terrible manufacturing error." Mason stood up and walked around the desk. He leaned against the edge, crossing his arms. "Everly, I analyzed the supplements you brought me last week. The ones in the labeled bottle. They were harmless. Just overpriced multivitamins. This poison? It is not in the pills. It is being administered separately, likely in liquid form. Something with a strong flavor to mask the chemical bitterness. The taste of the green smoothie flooded my mouth again. The metallic tang. And there is something else, Mason continued, his voice dropping lower. I noticed the way you are holding your side. I noticed the way you walked in here, favoring your left leg. I need to see your torso. I am fine, I said quickly, pulling my coat tighter. I hit the rack at the gym. Everly, Mason said, and for the first time, he sounded like the friend he was, not just the doctor. You have enough anticoagulant in your blood to make a paper cut dangerous. If you had hit a rack at the gym with these levels, you would have massive internal hemorrhaging. You would likely be in a coma. Whatever trauma you have, if it is not bleeding out, it means the impact was controlled, or you have been incredibly lucky. Show me. I trembled. My hands shook as I undid the buttons of my coat, then the blazer, then the silk shirt. I lifted the fabric, exposing the skin of my left side. Mason inhaled sharply through his teeth. The bruise was a terrifying landscape of violence. It was not just purple and blue. It was yellow, green, and black, wrapping around my ribs like a parasite. It was the shape of a fist, but worse than the color was the size. Because my blood was not clotting correctly, the bruising had spread, blooming outward from the impact site like ink in water. She hit you, Mason stated. It was not a question. She was helping me, I whispered, the old programming kicking in even as the data screamed the opposite. She said I needed to be tough. She said the detox makes you sensitive. Sometimes she has to force me to take it, for my own good. Mason turned back to his desk and grabbed a prescription pad. But he did not write a prescription. He wrote a name and a number. This is Detective Riley Cortez, he said, ripping the paper off and handing it to me. He handles homicide and aggravated assault. You are going to call him tonight. Homicide? I stared at the paper. I am not dead, Mason. You are walking dead. Everly, he said brutally. Someone is feeding you a lethal cocktail every night, and based on these bruises, they are beating you to make sure you swallow it. This is not discipline. This is not tough love. This is a slow-motion execution. If that fist had hit your spleen with these blood levels, you would have bled out internally in your sleep 2 nights ago. You are alive by sheer statistical probability. He shoved the envelope containing the full toxicology report into my hands. Take this. Get out of that house. Go to a hotel. Do not eat anything she gives you. Do not drink anything she pours. Do not let her touch you. I stood up, the room spinning slightly. The envelope felt heavy, like it contained lead bars instead of paper. I can't just leave Dad, I said, my voice sounding far away. She is feeding him too. He is on the same diet. Mason's face went pale. Then you need to get him out too. But you need to save yourself first. You cannot help him if you stroke out from a brain bleed. I walked out of the office in a daze. The snow was still falling, burying the world in silence. I sat in my car for a long time, the engine cold, the heater off. I looked at the envelope. Stepmother beat me after every meal. The sentence replayed in my head, but now, with the context of the data, the meaning shifted. She did not beat me because I was bad. She did not beat me because I was fat. She did not beat me because I was ungrateful. She beat me to tenderize me. She beat me to force compliance. The physical violence was just the delivery system. The weapon was the dinner itself. I drove to the nearest hospital, not to check in, but just to be somewhere with lights and people. I walked into the public restroom in the lobby. It was bright, white, and smelled of bleach. I locked the stall door and leaned against it, breathing hard. Then I moved to the sink. I stared at myself in the mirror. I looked the same as I had this morning. Dark hair, pale skin, tired eyes. But underneath that skin, my blood was betraying me, or rather, it was trying to warn me. I lifted my shirt again. The fluorescent lights were unforgiving. The bruise looked like a galaxy of pain exploding across my skin. I reached out and touched the center of the mark, right where her knuckles had connected 2 nights ago. I remembered her face, the mask of concern, the soft voice saying, "Mummy only does this to keep you healthy." Tears pricked my eyes, hot and angry. "If she does this to me," I whispered to my reflection, my voice trembling with a rage I had not allowed myself to feel for 16 years. "If she does this to me, then what have I been believing all this time?" I gripped the cold porcelain of the sink. The data was irrefutable. The timeline was exact. The chemical composition was undeniable. Monica was not saving me. She was killing me. And she was doing it one dinner at a time. I looked at the envelope on the counter. Inside was the weapon I needed. Not a gun, not a knife, but truth. Cold, hard, analyzed truth. I wiped my eyes. The trembling stopped. A cold clarity, sharp as the winter air outside, settled over me. I picked up the envelope. It was time to go home. Not to eat, not to be beaten, but to prepare, because if there was one thing Monica forgot, it was that she had forced me to become a scientist. And a scientist does not ignore the results. A scientist acts on them. To understand why I accepted the poison for so long, you have to understand the girl I was before I became a woman of science. You have to understand Maple Ridge, Ohio, and the simple, grease-stained life I shared with my father, Daniel. Before Monica, our life was messy in the most wonderful way. My father was a mechanic, the kind of man who could listen to an engine block and tell you exactly which piston was misfiring just by the rhythm of the rattle. He came home with oil under his fingernails and the smell of gasoline clinging to his work shirt. Our kitchen was not a place of judgment. It was a place where we ate meatloaf with ketchup, mashed potatoes with too much butter, and laughed about the eccentric customers who came into his shop. I was 12 years old, and I did not know how much I weighed. I did not care. I was just Everly, Daniel's daughter, and that was enough. Then came Monica. She did not enter our lives like a storm. She arrived like a cool, sanitized breeze that promised to blow away the dust. She met my father when her pristine white sedan broke down on the interstate. When she walked into our house for the first time, she did not look at the clutter or the worn upholstery. She looked at us. She looked at my father's round stomach and my chubby cheeks, and her eyes did not hold disgust, or so I thought. They held a terrifying kind of potential. She looked at us the way a sculptor looks at a lump of unformed clay. She called herself a holistic lifestyle architect, a title that meant nothing and everything all at once. Within 3 months, she had moved in. Within 4, she had married my father, and within 5, she had begun the renovation of our lives. The first thing to change was the kitchen. The toaster oven was replaced by a high-speed blender. The pantry, once home to boxes of cereal and bags of chips, was purged. In their place came glass jars filled with things I could not pronounce: quinoa, chia seeds, spirulina powder. But the most significant addition was the digital scale. It sat on the granite counter like an altar. "We are going to be a team," Monica told us one evening, her voice soft and chiming like a silver bell. She was beautiful, in a sharp, angular way, always dressed in expensive yoga gear that highlighted her skeletal frame. "I am going to pull this family out of the grave you are digging with your teeth." She brought her son, Evan, with her. Evan was a year older than me, a boy made of sharp elbows and knees, with pale skin that looked like it had never seen the sun. Monica paraded him in front of us like a prize show dog. "Look at Evan," she would say, placing a hand on his bony shoulder. "He treats his body like a temple. He knows that food is fuel, not entertainment. Everly, you have such a pretty face. You have so much potential to be a better version of yourself. Imagine how light you would feel if you were just less." That was the beginning of the metrics. Every meal became a math problem. Monica bought a small kitchen scale, silver and cold to the touch. Before anything went onto my plate, it went onto the scale. 100 grams of steamed chicken, 50 grams of broccoli, no butter, no salt. Salt caused water retention. She said, Salt was a lie the body told itself to look bigger. I was 12 years old, going on 13, and I was suddenly acutely aware of the space I took up in the world. Weighing is not punishment, sweetie, she would coo as I stared at the meager pile of green on my plate. It is awareness. You cannot manage what you do not measure. The psychological conditioning was subtle at first. She bought me a leather-bound journal. The wellness log, she called it. I had to write down everything I consumed. If I drank a glass of water, I wrote it down. If I chewed a stick of gum, I wrote it down. At the end of the day, she would sit with me on the sofa, smelling of lavender and judgment, and review my entries. "Oh, Everly," she would sigh, tracing a manicured fingernail over the entry for a school lunch. "A sandwich? And an apple? That is a lot of carbohydrates for one sitting. Did you feel sluggish afterward? I bet you felt heavy. Your brain cannot function when it is drowning in sugar." She never raised her voice. That was her genius. If she had screamed, I might have rebelled. If she had called me names, my father might have intervened. But she wrapped her cruelty in the language of medical concern. My father, simple and trusting Daniel, was completely seduced by her jargon. He had watched his own father die of a stroke, and he carried a deep, silent fear of his own mortality. Monica played on that fear like a virtuoso pianist. "Daniel," she would say during dinner, watching him chew his kale salad with a grimace, "I know it is not a cheeseburger, but I want you to walk Everly down the aisle one day. Do you want to leave her an orphan because you could not say no to saturated fat?" And my father would put down his fork, look at her with gratitude, and say, "You are right, honey. Thank you for looking out for us." He believed she was an expert. He believed she was saving us. And because he believed it, I had to believe it too. The dinner table, once the heart of our home, became a courtroom. Monica sat at the head, not eating, but watching. She always ate before us, or later, claiming she was intermittent fasting to purify her cells. She would sip hot water with lemon and watch me eat. I remember one night specifically. I was 14. I had spent the afternoon playing volleyball in gym class, and I was ravenous. The hunger was a physical pain, a gnawing emptiness in the center of my stomach. Dinner was a piece of white fish the size of a deck of cards and 6 spears of asparagus. I finished it in 2 minutes. My stomach growled, loud enough to be heard in the quiet room. I looked at the serving dish in the center of the table. There was one piece of fish left, just one. I reached for the serving fork. My hand was shaking slightly. "Everly," Monica said. She did not shout. She just said my name. I froze. She smiled, a sad, disappointed smile that reached her eyes, but did not warm them. "Are you still hungry?" "Yes," I whispered. "I played sports today. I am starving." She leaned forward, resting her chin on her clasped hands. "Hunger is just a signal. Everly, it is your body throwing a tantrum because it is addicted to fullness. But think about your father." I looked at my dad. He was staring at his plate, looking tired. "Your father works so hard," Monica continued, her voice dripping with artificial honey. "His heart is fragile. We are trying to build a stress-free environment for him. When you overeat, when you gorge yourself, you become heavy, you become sluggish, you become a medical liability. Do you want to be a burden on your father's heart? Everly, do you want him to worry about you developing diabetes or heart disease? Do you want to be the reason his blood pressure goes up?" My hand retracted as if the fork had burned me. "No," I said, my voice trembling. "Good girl," she said. "Push the plate away. The hunger will pass. It is just your body detoxing from its greed." I pushed the plate away. I went to bed hungry. I lay in the dark, listening to my stomach churn, and I told myself that the pain was proof that I was being good, that I was loving my father by starving myself. I began to shrink, not just physically, although the weight did drop off me, leaving me gaunt and pale. I shrank in spirit. I learned to take up less space at the table. I learned to eat slowly, chewing each bite 20 times so it seemed like I had more food than I did. I learned to keep my head down, to avoid eye contact, to become a piece of furniture that Monica could arrange as she pleased. She constantly compared me to Evan. Evan, who could do no wrong. Evan, who was so thin his ribs showed through his t-shirt, yet Monica praised his clean architecture. Evan has discipline, she would tell the neighbors when they came over for her sugar-free tea parties. He understands that food is functional. Everly struggles. She has her father's constitution, coarse, heavy, but we are working on it. I am trying to break those bad genetic habits. I started to view my own body as the enemy. It was a traitor that wanted food, a beast that needed to be tamed. Monica was the lion tamer, and I was the unruly animal. The absolute breaking point of my childhood, the moment that defined the next decade of my life, happened on my 16th birthday. 16 is supposed to be a milestone, in the movies. There are parties, cars, and giant cakes with sparklers. I did not expect a car. I did not expect a party, but there was a small, quiet hope in my chest that maybe, just for one day, the rules would be suspended. I came downstairs that morning. The house was spotless, as always. The smell of lemon cleaner hung in the air. "Happy birthday," Dad said. He hugged me, and I could feel his ribs, too. He had lost 50 pounds since Monica took over. He looked older, frazzled, but he smiled. 16 years old. My little girl is a woman. "Come to the table," Monica said from the kitchen. "I have a surprise for you." My heart leaped. A surprise. Maybe pancakes? Maybe a muffin? Just one? I sat at my usual spot. Evan was already there, drinking a glass of green sludge, scrolling on his phone. He barely looked up. Monica walked over to the table. She was holding a large white plate, covered with a silver dome, the kind they use in fancy restaurants. "I thought about this a lot," she said, standing behind me, her hands resting on my shoulders. Her grip was tight, her fingers digging into my collarbone. Most mothers would buy you a cake. They would fill you with refined flour, sugar, and artificial dyes. They would spike your insulin and poison your liver just to celebrate a date on the calendar. She leaned down, her breath hot against my ear. "But I love you too much to poison you. Everly, I love you enough to make the hard choices. I love you enough to say no when everyone else says yes." She lifted the silver dome. On the stark white porcelain plate sat 3 slices of apple. They were cut razor thin, almost transparent. Beside them was a single almond. "Nature's candy," she announced proudly. "Crisp, clean, pure, happy birthday, Everly. This is the start of your best year yet." I stared at the apple slices. They looked pathetic against the vast whiteness of the plate. Tears pricked my eyes, hot and stinging. I looked at my father. I begged him with my eyes to say something, to say this was crazy, to go to the cupboard and pull out a box of cookies, to be my dad. He looked at the apple slices. Then he looked at Monica, who was beaming with the beatific glow of a saint. "It looks fresh," Dad said quietly. "Happy birthday, honey." He picked up his newspaper and hid his face. That was the moment I broke, or rather, that was the moment I solidified into something else. I picked up the fork. I stabbed one of the apple slices. I put it in my mouth. It tasted like nothing. It tasted like ash. "Thank you, Monica," I said, my voice dead and flat. "You are welcome," she chirped. "See? Isn't it better to feel light? Isn't it better to know you are in control?" I ate the 3 slices. I ate the almond. And as I chewed, I made a vow to myself. I would get out of this house. I would go somewhere where logic ruled, where facts mattered, and where love wasn't measured in grams of carbohydrates. I threw myself into my studies, biology, chemistry, anatomy. I needed to understand the machine of the human body, so she could never lie to me about it again. I spent my nights in the library, skipping lunch to read medical journals, hiding granola bars in my locker like contraband. But even as I planned my escape, even as I grew smarter, the damage was done. She had wired my brain to associate food with guilt and hunger with virtue. And she had taught me that love, true, healthy love, was painful. It was restrictive. It was a woman standing over you, watching you starve, and telling you it was for your own good. I did not know then that the starvation was just the prologue. I did not know that the apple slices were just the beginning of what she was willing to feed me. I thought the worst thing she could do was deny me food. I was wrong. The denial was safe. It was what she would eventually start giving me that would nearly kill me. The library became my bunker. If the kitchen was Monica's domain, where she ruled with a silver scale and a velvet whip, the library was mine. It was a place of silence, smelling of old paper and dust, where the only thing that mattered was the information I could absorb. I treated my textbooks like shields. I realized early on that Monica could control what I ate. She could criticize my posture, and she could manipulate my father. But she could not touch my grades. She could not detox my GPA. I became obsessed with academic perfection. It was a desperate, clawing need to be good at something that had nothing to do with the circumference of my waist. I spent every lunch period in the chemistry lab, partially to avoid the cafeteria where students ate pizza and fries with reckless abandon, and partially because the logic of chemical bonds made sense to me. Carbon bonded with oxygen in a predictable way. There was no emotional manipulation in a covalent bond. It just was. When the acceptance letter from North Bay University arrived, I did not just read it. I inhaled it. A full scholarship, biodata science, Oregon. Oregon. It might as well have been the moon. It was thousands of miles away from Maple Ridge. Ohio. Thousands of miles away from the digital scale. Thousands of miles away from the green smoothies and the sad, thin slices of apple. The day I left was a blur of nervous energy. My father packed the car, looking proud, but also vaguely lost, as if he did not know who he would be without a daughter to quietly protect from the sidelines. Monica stood on the porch, wrapped in a cashmere shawl, looking like the picture of maternal grace. When I went to hug my father, he squeezed me tight. "You make us proud, Evie," he said, using the nickname Monica had banned years ago because she said it sounded infantile. Then it was Monica's turn. She pulled me into a hug that felt more like a restraint. She smelled of lavender and antiseptic, the scent of her clean living. She pressed her cheek against mine, and her voice dropped to that familiar, terrifying whisper that only I was meant to hear. "Do not go crazy out there, Everly," she hissed into my ear. "There is no one to watch you in Oregon. Do not eat like an animal and come back fat. Your father is so proud of how you look now. It would break his heart if you returned looking like you used to. You do not want to disappoint him, do you?" She pulled back and smiled, smoothing my hair. "Safe travels, darling. Remember, discipline is love." I drove away with her voice ringing in my ears louder than the radio. I was escaping the house, but I was realizing with a sinking dread that I was taking the prison guard with me in my head. University was a shock to the system, for the first time in 6 years. No one was watching what I put on my tray in the dining hall. The first night in the dorms, my roommate, a cheerful girl named Sarah, who had posters of rock bands on her wall, ordered a pepperoni pizza at midnight. "Want some?" she asked, opening the box. The smell of melted cheese and grease filled the small room. It smelled like heaven. It smelled like sin. I shouldn't," I said, the reflex automatic. "Come on, it is just pizza," Sarah laughed. "Live a little." I took a slice. My hands shook. I ate it quickly, almost violently. Standing by the window, it tasted incredible. It tasted like freedom. But the moment I swallowed the last bite, the guilt crashed down on me with the weight of a collapsing building. I could hear Monica, greedy, heavy, toxic. "Your father will be ashamed." That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, hating myself for 300 calories of cheese. This became my new cycle. I would go days eating almost nothing, fueling myself on black coffee and fear, trying to be the perfect version Monica had sculpted. Then, under the stress of exams, I would break, I would eat a burger or a bag of chips. eating them in the privacy of my car or a bathroom stall, shoving the food in like I was destroying evidence. Then would come the shame, the starving, the long runs in the rain until my lungs burned. I was free, but I was still trapped in the labyrinth she had built in my mind. However, the classroom began to offer me a different kind of weapon. My major, biodata science, was a grueling intersection of biology, chemistry, and statistical analysis. I sat in lecture halls listening to professors explain the Krebs cycle, the function of the liver, the true nature of lipids and cholesterol. I learned that the liver does not need a green juice to detoxify the body. It is a biological engine designed by millions of years of evolution to do exactly that, provided it is not overwhelmed by actual poisons. I learned that toxins, as Monica described them, vague, floating evils caused by gluten or sugar, did not exist in medical science. I learned that depriving a growing body of fat affects brain development and hormonal balance. I sat there, scribbling notes, and a cold fury began to rise in my chest. She had lied. She had not just exaggerated, she had fabricated an entire reality. Her holistic architecture was a house of cards built on pseudoscience and control. She wasn't a guru, she was a fraud. I began working in a research lab during my sophomore year. It was there, amidst the hum of the centrifuge and the sterile clink of test tubes, that I found my true religion: data. One afternoon, my professor, Dr. Aris, was showing me how to analyze blood panels for markers of cardiac stress. "Look at the numbers. Everly," he said, pointing to the screen. "Patients lie. They say they take their meds. They say they do not smoke. They say they exercise. But the blood? The blood has no ego. The blood has no agenda. The data is the only truth in the room. The data is the only truth." I clung to that sentence. It became my mantra. I started applying it to everything. I stopped trusting feelings. I stopped trusting words. I trusted results. But knowing the truth and living it were two different things. Every holiday break, I had to return to Maple Ridge. I had to go back to the scene of the crime. And every time I walked through the door, I reverted. I was 20 years old, top of my class, a published undergraduate researcher. But the moment I stepped into Monica's kitchen, I was 12 years old again. She would look me up and down, her eyes scanning for any ounce of gained weight. "You look soft," she would say, handing me a cup of herbal tea that tasted like dirt. "The cafeteria food must be terrible, but do not worry, Mummy has something for you." She would produce small, amber glass bottles, no labels, no ingredients list, just dark liquid or nondescript capsules. "My friend in the wellness circle imports these from Peru," she would claim. "They are concentrated antioxidants. They will help you burn off that college sludge. Take 2 with dinner every night while you are here, and take this bottle back to school with you." I held the bottle. My scientific brain screamed at me. What is in this? Where is the FDA approval? What is the chemical composition? But my daughter brain, the part of me that just wanted to survive the holiday without a fight, without her making a scene in front of Dad, won out. "Thanks, Monica," I would say. And I would take them. I swallowed them to shut her up. I swallowed them because it was easier than explaining to my father why I was refusing Monica's generosity. I told myself they were just placebo pills, expensive sawdust and caffeine. I never imagined they were anything worse. I was arrogant in my belief that her worst weapon was words. During the winter break of my junior year, I was sitting in the living room reading a paper on genomic sequencing. Monica was in the kitchen with Mrs. Gable, a neighbor who had always looked at me with pity. They thought I was wearing headphones. I was, but the music was off. "Everly is doing so well," Mrs. Gable said. "You must be proud. Dean's List again." "Oh, we are relieved, mostly." Monica's voice drifted out, smug and self-satisfied. "You know how she was before I came along. Daniel had let her run feral. She was gorging herself, barely passing her classes. She has no internal regulator. That girl, if I had not stepped in, if I had not put her on the protocol, She would be 300 pounds and working at a gas station by now. I froze. The book in my lap felt heavy. "Really?" Mrs. Gable asked. She always seemed like such a bright girl to me. Bright? She was a mess, Monica laughed, a light, tinkling sound. I built that girl. Every pound she lost, every grade she gets. That is my discipline manifesting in her. She is my product. She just does not realize it yet. Without me, she is nothing but an appetite with legs. An appetite with legs. I stood up slowly. I walked to the hallway mirror. I looked at myself. I saw the dark circles under my eyes from studying until 3 in the morning. I saw the sharp line of my jaw, honed by years of restricted calories. I saw the woman who could run a regression analysis on a complex genomic set in under an hour. Monica did not build me. I survived her. I went back to the guest room and packed my bag. I left 2 days early, telling my father I had an emergency lab meeting. I could not breathe the air in that house anymore. That drive back to Oregon was the longest of my life. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I made a vow to myself as I crossed the state line. I would become so successful, so wealthy, and so undeniable that Monica could never claim me again. I would build a life of glass and steel and hard data. I would buy a house she couldn't afford. I would have a career she couldn't understand. I would erase her fingerprints from my soul. But as I unpacked in my dorm room, finding the unlabeled bottle of pills she had slipped into my suitcase, I didn't throw them away. I set them on my desk. I stared at them. And that night, after a dinner of plain salad because her voice was still loud in my head, I took 2. Because even though I knew she was a liar, even though I knew she was a narcissist, the terrified child inside me still believed one thing. If I take the medicine, maybe she will finally love me, or at least, maybe she will let me be. I was a scientist who had discovered the cure for cancer in data, but I still couldn't cure the cancer of my own need for approval. And that blind spot, that desperate compliance, was exactly what she was counting on. It was the open door through which she would eventually walk, not just with insults, but with something far more lethal. Hemisphere Analytics was born not in a garage, but in a cramped, windowless study room at the university library. It was founded by myself, Raj, and Chloe. 2 friends who were just as obsessed with the unseen patterns of the world as I was, while other graduates were buying suits for interviews or backpacking across Europe. We were pooling our meager savings to buy server time and secondhand blood processing equipment. We had a hypothesis that bordered on arrogance. We believed that current pathology reports were lazy. They looked for what was already wrong. We wanted to look for what was whispering about going wrong. We wanted to build an algorithm that could listen to the blood. For 2 years, I did not sleep more than 4 hours a night. I lived on caffeine and adrenaline, my eyes permanently adjusting to the glow of dual monitors. I was the architect of the core code, a program designed to ingest thousands of data points from a standard blood draw, viscosity, platelet shape, trace mineral ratios, protein folding speeds, and find the anomalies that human eyes missed. It was grueling, unglamorous work. We worked out of a rented industrial unit that smelled of ozone and stale coffee, but I loved it. For the first time in my life, I was building a world where the rules were absolute. Code either compiled, or it did not. There was no ambiguity. There was no stepmother smiling while hurting you. There was just the binary purity of 0 and 1. Our breakthrough came on a Tuesday in November. We had been running a beta test with a local clinic, processing anonymized samples from their archives. The system flagged a sample from a 30-year-old male. The doctors had cleared him as healthy, citing fatigue due to stress. Our algorithm, however, screamed that his T-cell receptor diversity was collapsing in a pattern that preceded acute myeloid leukemia by 6 months. We called the clinic. They were skeptical, but they called the patient back. They ran a bone marrow biopsy. We were right. He was in the earliest, most treatable stage of a cancer that usually isn't caught until it is a death sentence. We saved his life, not with a scalpel, but with math. That was the spark. Hemisphere Analytics went from a science project to a sensation overnight. Medical journals wanted to interview us. Venture capital firms started calling. We moved from the industrial unit to a glass-walled office in Port Aurora. We hired 50 staff members. I became the face of predictive hematology. Then came the acquisition offer. A global medical conglomerate, the kind that owns hospitals on 3 continents, put a contract on the table. They wanted our technology, they wanted our patent, and they wanted us. The number on the contract was $90 million. I remember sitting in the boardroom, staring at the zeros. $90 million. It was an amount of money that made the concept of a grocery budget obsolete. It was an amount of money that meant I would never, ever have to depend on anyone for survival again. We signed. As part of the deal, I stayed on as the chief science officer. I retained control over the data integrity. I made sure they could not water down my science for profit. Overnight, my bank account looked like a phone number, but I did not buy a sports car. I did not buy designer handbags. I did not post about it on social media. In fact, I went to great lengths to ensure that my name was buried in the corporate press releases, overshadowed by the brand name of the acquiring company. I wanted the power, but I did not want the visibility, especially not back in Maple Ridge. Instead of a mansion in the city, I went looking for a fortress. I found it on the edge of Silvercrest Lake, about 40 minutes outside of Port Aurora. It was a property that had sat on the market for 2 years because it was too severe for most buyers. It was a cantilevered structure of steel and reinforced glass, clinging to a granite cliff face overlooking the water. It looked less like a home and more like a villain's lair in a spy movie. I fell in love with it immediately. I bought it through a shell company, a generic LLC with a name that sounded like a paper supplier. No one, not the real estate agent and certainly not the neighbors, knew that Everly Richards was the owner. The house became my sanctuary. I spent another $1 million renovating the interior to match the inside of my mind. I tore out the warm wood flooring and replaced it with polished concrete that stayed cool to the touch. I removed the cozy breakfast nooks and installed a kitchen that rivaled a commercial laboratory. The center island was a slab of white quartz, 12 feet long. On one side, I had a professional induction cooktop and Japanese knives. On the other side, separated by a sterile glass partition, sat a centrifuge, a mass spectrometer, and a high-powered microscope. It was eccentric, perhaps even a little mad to an outsider, but to me, it was perfect. I could cook a meal, weighing my ingredients not out of fear, but out of chemical precision, and then slide over to analyze a blood sample in the same room. Food and biology, the poison and the cure. I wanted them both under my eye, under my control. My life became a study in duality. In Port Aurora, I was a high-powered executive. I wore tailored suits, commanded a department of 200 researchers, and made decisions that shifted the stock market. I drove a dark gray electric sedan that whispered down the highway. I stood in my glass house, drinking filtered water, looking out at the pines and the dark water of the lake, feeling untouchable. But to my family in Ohio, I was still just Everly. I never told them about the sale. I never told them about the $90 million. When I called my father, I told him I was working in data management for a medical company. I let them believe I was a mid-level manager, earning a decent salary, paying off student loans, living in a rented apartment. I did not want them to know. I knew exactly what would happen if Monica found out I was worth nearly 9 figures. The dynamics would shift. She would not see me as a daughter figure to be controlled. She would see me as a resource to be harvested, or worse, she would take credit for it. She would tell everyone that her discipline was what made me successful. I could not stomach that. So, I played the role of the struggling, hard-working daughter. My phone would buzz with texts from Monica. They were always the same blend of passive aggression and faux concern. Saw an article about heavy metals in tap water. She would write, "Hope you're buying the alkaline water I told you about. Remember, your brain needs clean hydration to work. Do not let city life make you sluggish." Or, "Your father is worried you are working too hard. Make sure you are not eating takeout. Sodium puffs up your face, and you know you have that round shape naturally. Stick to the greens. I would read these messages while standing on my balcony. The cold wind off the lake whipping my hair. I would be wearing a cashmere sweater that cost $2,000, holding a glass of vintage wine that I had chemically analyzed for purity before opening. The irony was sharp enough to cut. She was lecturing me about health while I was revolutionizing the way the world diagnosed disease. She was warning me about sodium while I was leading a team that was mapping the human proteome. "Okay, Monica," I would type back. "I will be careful. Thanks for the tip." It was a power play of the highest order. I held all the cards, and she did not even know we were playing a game. One evening, shortly after the acquisition was finalized, I stood in my kitchen lab. The house was silent, save for the low hum of the refrigerator and the gentle whir of the centrifuge spinning a test sample. The floor-to-ceiling windows were dark, reflecting the interior of the room against the night. I looked at my reflection in the glass. I looked expensive. My skin was clear. Thanks to dermatologists, not detox teas, my hair was glossy. I was strong. My phone chimed. It was a picture from Monica. It was a photo of a salad, wilted spinach, a few walnuts, no dressing. "Dinner time in Maple Ridge." The caption read, "Clean fuel for clean minds. Hope you are not eating pasta tonight. Love you." I looked at the phone. Then I looked around my fortress. I looked at the sleek lines of the architecture, the expensive equipment, the sheer vastness of the space I occupied. I owned this mountain. I owned this view. I could buy Maple Ridge 3 times over and pave it. Yet, to her, I was still the fat girl who needed to be reminded not to eat pasta. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. It echoed in the large, empty room. "If they knew," I whispered to the empty air, "if they knew I was standing in a $90 million secret, if they knew I could buy and sell their entire reality, would they still treat me like a broken thing that needs fixing?" The answer, I suspected, was yes, because to Monica, control was not about money, it was about dominance, and no amount of zeros in my bank account would ever change the fact that she needed me to be small so she could feel big. I set the phone down on the quartz counter. Face down, I walked over to the centrifuge, the blue light of the display illuminating my face. "Let them think I am small," I said to the machine. "Let them think I am weak. It makes them careless." I did not know then how true those words would become. I did not know that my secret life, my secret house, and my secret equipment would soon be the only thing standing between my father and a meticulously planned death. I was building a fortress to keep the world out, but soon, I would have to invite the monsters in to destroy them. I turned off the lights in the kitchen, leaving only the glow of the instruments. I was safe here. I was powerful here. But thousands of miles away, the trap was already being set for my return, and no amount of money could protect me from what was waiting at the dinner table. Only the science could do that. And I was ready. The call that shattered my sterile, protected world came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the middle of a conference call with our investors in Zurich, discussing the integration of our new predictive algorithms into their European clinics. My phone buzzed on the mahogany table. It was the landline from Maple Ridge. I usually let it go to voicemail, but something about the persistence of the vibration made me pause. I excused myself and answered, "He is in the hospital, Everly." Monica's voice was not hysterical. It was breathless, trembling, curated to sound like a woman on the edge of a collapse. "What happened?" I asked, my grip tightening on the phone. "A heart attack," she sobbed. "A mild one, thank God. But the doctors say his arteries are... Oh, Everly, it is terrible. He needs you. We have no one else. I cannot do this alone." In that second, the $90 million in my bank account, the glass fortress on the cliff, and my title of Chief Science Officer dissolved. I was just a daughter again. I was just the girl who had left her father behind in a house run by a tyrant. Guilt, cold and sharp, pierced through my chest. "I am coming," I said. I took a leave of absence. I told my team I had a family emergency. I packed a suitcase, not with designer clothes, but with the modest, nondescript items I wore when I visited home. I drove the rental car to Maple Ridge, feeling the air get heavier with every mile. When I walked into the house, it felt like stepping into a cult compound. The living room had been stripped of the comfortable, worn furniture I grew up with. In its place were rigid, ergonomic chairs that looked like medical equipment. The air smelled of boiled cabbage and aggressive essential oils, eucalyptus and tea tree, sharp enough to make my eyes water. But the kitchen was the true horror show. It had been transformed into what Monica called her wellness command center. Every surface was covered in canisters of green powders, jars of murky liquids, and plastic containers of unidentifiable dried roots. There was no food. There were no apples, no bread, no milk, just supplements. My father was sitting at the kitchen table. He looked gray. He had lost so much weight that his skin seemed to hang off his bones like oversized drapery. His eyes were dull, but when he saw me, he managed a weak smile. "Evie," he wheezed, "you came." "Of course I came, Dad," I said, hugging him carefully. He felt fragile, like a dried leaf that would crumble if I squeezed too hard. Monica swept into the room, wearing a pristine white apron over her yoga clothes. She held a tray with 3 glasses of thick, dark green liquid. "Welcome home, prodigal daughter," she said, her voice sugary. "Just in time for the vascular reconstruction protocol." "The what?" I asked. "The doctors want to put him on statins and blood thinners," Monica said, setting the tray down with a decisive clatter. "Poison, big pharma poison meant to keep him sick." I told them absolutely not. I have designed a regimen to scrub his arteries clean naturally. We are all going to do it, as a family. Support system, right? She pushed a glass toward my father. He took it with shaking hands. "Monica knows best," he murmured, taking a sip and grimacing. "She saved me, Evie. If I hadn't been on her diet before, the doctor said the attack would have been massive." I bit my tongue so hard I tasted copper. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him that malnutrition weakens the heart muscle. I wanted to tell him that scrubbing arteries with kale and mystery roots was biologically impossible. I was one of the leading blood data scientists in the country, and I was watching my father drink snake oil. But I looked at his face. He looked terrified. He looked at Monica like she was a lifeline. If I challenged her now, if I took away his faith in her cure, the stress alone might kill him. "Right," I said, my voice tight. "Support system." That first dinner set the tone for the nightmare that followed. The meal consisted of a small bowl of steamed chard and a piece of boiled tofu the size of a matchbox, and, of course, the supplements. Monica placed a small plastic cup next to my father's plate. It contained 4 capsules and a dropper full of a viscous, amber liquid. "Drink up, Daniel," she said. Then she placed a similar cup next to mine. "For you too, Everly," she said. "You have been living in the city, breathing smog, eating stress. You need to align your blood with your father's so you do not bring negative energy into his healing field." I picked up the cup. I sniffed the amber liquid. It smelled metallic, with a faint undertone of something sweet, like anise. "What is in this, Monica?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "I would like to see the bottle." The room went silent. My father stopped chewing. "It is a proprietary blend," Monica said, her smile tightening at the edges. "My naturopath mixes it. It is for circulation." "I have a degree in biochemistry," I said, pushing the cup away. "I do not take anything without seeing the ingredient list. It is a professional habit." Monica stared at me. Her eyes were hard, flat stones. "Daniel," she said to my father, her voice wavering with fake hurt. "I try so hard. I stay up all night researching, and she comes in here, after years of being away, and treats me like I'm trying to hurt you." "Evie, please," my father whispered. "Just take it. For me, it makes her happy." "I will take the vitamins," I said, compromising. "But not the liquid. Not until I know what it is." I swallowed the capsules. They looked generic enough, but I left the dropper untouched. After dinner, my father went upstairs to rest. He moved slowly, clutching the banister. Monica and I were left alone in the kitchen to clear the dishes. The moment his bedroom door clicked shut upstairs, the atmosphere in the kitchen shifted. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Monica walked over to where I was standing by the sink. I expected a lecture. I expected a passive-aggressive comment about my weight or my attitude. Instead, I felt a sudden explosion of pain in my right side. It happened so fast I didn't even gasp. Monica had driven her elbow, hard and precise, into the soft tissue between my ribs and my hip. I doubled over, clutching the counter, the air seizing in my lungs. "Oh my goodness!" Monica shouted, her voice pitching up loud enough to carry upstairs. "I am so clumsy. I was just trying to give you a love tap. Sweetie, did I bump you? I do not know my own strength sometimes." I looked up at her, gasping for breath. My side throbbed with a sickening, deep ache. Monica was standing close to me, her face inches from mine. Her lips were smiling, but her eyes were dead. "That," she whispered, her voice a hiss of venom, "was for embarrassing me at the table. You will drink the drops tomorrow, all of them." She patted my cheek, hard. "Go put some ice on it. You bruise so easily. It is because you are toxic." I went to my room that night and lifted my shirt. A red bloom was already forming on my skin, shaping itself into a dark, ugly bruise. I lay in the bed I had grown up in, listening to the wind rattle the window, and realized with a dawn of horror that the psychological warfare of my childhood had evolved. She wasn't just starving me anymore. She was hurting me, and she was doing it right under my father's nose. The next few days were a blur of pain and coercion. Every night at dinner, the cup would be there. If I hesitated, Monica would look at me, her hand resting casually on a heavy serving spoon or the edge of the granite counter, a silent promise. "Drink it, or I will hurt you when he leaves the room." And if I still refused, the punishment was swift. It was never a slap. Slaps leave handprints. Slaps make noise. Monica was a master of the invisible assault. It was a knee to the thigh under the table while we were playing cards. It was a pinch on the tender flesh of my upper arm, twisting hard enough to rupture capillaries but looking like a playful squeeze from a distance. It was a punch to the lower back as she passed me in the hallway, disguised as a stumble. "You are so ungrateful," she would whisper as I winced, holding my breath to keep from crying out. "This is the price of ingratitude. I am saving your father's life, and you are trying to undermine me." I began to drink the drops. I drank them to stop the hits. I drank them because I was 28 years old, a millionaire, a genius in my field, and I was terrified of my stepmother. Within a week, my body began to fail. It started with fatigue, not the tired of a long workday, but a bone-deep exhaustion that made lifting my head from the pillow feel like bench-pressing weight. Then came the dizziness. I would stand up and the room would tilt, black spots dancing in my vision. I was brushing my teeth one morning when I spat into the sink. The foam was bright red. I stared at the blood swirling down the drain. My gums were bleeding. I went downstairs, my legs feeling heavy and strange. "Monica," I said, holding onto the doorframe, "I am bleeding, my gums, and I have bruises on my legs that I do not remember getting. I think I need to see a doctor." Monica was chopping celery with a large, sharp knife. Chop, chop, chop. She did not look up. "That is the healing crisis," she said calmly. "It is the Herxheimer reaction. The protocol is working. It is pushing the deep-seated toxins out of your organs. They have to exit somewhere. Everly. Sometimes it is the gums. Sometimes it is the skin. It means you are finally getting clean." "That is not medically accurate," I said, my voice slurring slightly. "Bleeding gums are a sign of vitamin deficiency or clotting disorders." She stopped chopping. She turned to me, the knife still in her hand. "Do not use your big city words with me," she said. "You are weak. Your body is purging years of neglect. Stop whining and drink your tea." The breaking point came 2 nights later. I had tried to hide the dropper of liquid in a napkin during dinner. I thought I was slick. I thought I was fast. But Monica saw everything. After my father went to the living room to watch his favorite game show, Monica cornered me by the dishwasher. "Empty your pockets," she said. "I do not know what you are talking about." I lied. She reached out and grabbed my wrist. Her grip was iron. She yanked my hand out of my pocket. The napkin fell to the floor, stained with the amber liquid I had spat out. The rage in her face was instantaneous. She didn't just hit me this time. She shoved me. She shoved me hard against the counter, and as I doubled over, she brought her fist down onto my kidney. The pain was blinding. It was a white-hot spike that sent me crumbling to the floor. I fell to my knees, gasping, unable to draw air into my lungs. I curled into a ball on the cold tile, waiting for the next blow. But it didn't come. Instead, Monica crouched down next to me. She was so close I could smell the peppermint of her breath. She reached out and lifted my chin, forcing me to look at her. "You think you are clever," she whispered. "You think you can come in here with your fancy job and your arrogance and tell me how to run my house?" "You are hurting me," I wheezed, tears leaking from my eyes. "I am going to tell Dad. I am going to tell him everything." Monica smiled. It was the most terrifying expression I had ever seen. "Go ahead," she said softly. "Go tell him. Tell him his wife is a monster. Tell him the woman who cooks his meals and manages his medication is abusing his daughter." She leaned in closer. "But remember his heart, Everly. The doctor said any shock could be fatal, any stress. If you tell him, his blood pressure will spike, his heart will seize, and he will die, right here, in front of you." She stroked my hair, her touch gentle now, mocking. "My protocol is the only thing keeping him alive. If you take me away, he dies. If you stress him out, he dies. His blood is on your hands. Everly, your truth will kill his heart. Is that what you want?" I stared at her, paralyzed. My side was screaming in agony. My mouth tasted of blood from my gums. She had checkmated me. She knew I understood the physiology of a heart attack. She knew I knew that stress was a trigger. She was using my own father's life as a human shield to protect her sadism. "No," I whispered, defeated. "Good," she said, standing up and smoothing her apron. "Now get up, wipe your face, and take your drops. Daddy is waiting for us to watch the show." I pulled myself up using the counter. I looked at the glass of poison on the table. I was the chief science officer of a multi-million-dollar company. I could analyze a genome in an hour, but in this kitchen, I was powerless. I picked up the glass. I drank it. And as the liquid burned its way down my throat, I realized that science alone couldn't save me. I needed data. I needed proof so undeniable that it wouldn't just expose her. It would destroy her before she could hurt my father. But for now, I had to bleed. I had to let her win. Because the only thing more dangerous than the poison in my blood was the shock that would stop my father's heart. The collapse happened on a Thursday evening, right in the middle of a commercial break for a game show my father was watching. I had just stood up to take my empty glass, the one that had contained the amber liquid, to the sink. One moment, I was walking across the beige carpet. The next, the room tilted violently to the left. The floor rushed up to meet me. But I never felt the impact. When I woke up, I was lying on the sofa. Monica was hovering over me, waving smelling salts under my nose. "Oh, thank goodness," she sighed, though her eyes were scanning the room. Not me. "You fainted, dear. Probably low blood sugar. I told you that your body is screaming for more nutrients. You need to double the dose of the drops." My head was spinning, a nauseating carousel of motion. I tried to sit up, but the room swam. I touched my nose. It was wet. I pulled my hand away and saw bright red blood. "Just a nosebleed," Monica said dismissively, handing me a tissue. "Detox, pure detox." But as I lay there, feeling the metallic drip in the back of my throat, my scientific brain finally overrode my conditioned fear. This was not detox. This was systematic organ failure. That night, while the house slept, I crawled into the bathroom and locked the door. I turned on the shower to mask the sound of my voice and sat on the cold tile floor. I dialed Mason Hale. "Mason," I whispered when he picked up, "I need a favor, and I need you to ask no questions until I have the data." "Everly?" His voice was thick with sleep. "It is 3 a.m. Are you okay?" "I need a phlebotomist," I said. "I need someone you trust to come to Maple Ridge. I need a full toxicology panel, heavy metals, synthetic poisons, coagulation factors, everything, and I need it done off the books." Mason paused. "You sound like you are dying." "I think I might be," I said. "Just send someone, please." 2 days later, a courier from Mason's private lab met me in the parking lot of the local grocery store. I sat in my car and drew my own blood, filling 5 vials until I felt lightheaded. I handed them over in a biohazard bag, along with a promise to Mason that I would explain everything soon. One more thing. Mason had told me on the phone before I met the courier. "I want you to use the Hemisphere Beta app, the tracker we built for the clinical trials. Log everything, every gram of food, every milliliter of liquid, and log your symptoms. Exact times. If we are going to find a pattern, I need clean inputs." So I became a spy in my own misery. For the next week, I recorded my life as a dataset. Monday, 6 p.m., steamed broccoli, 80 grams, grilled chicken, dry, 100 grams. Monday, 6:15 p.m., the amber drops, 5 milliliters, administered by Monica. Monday, 8:30 p.m., symptom log, nausea, dizziness, spontaneous bruising on left forearm. I logged the violence too, though I disguised it in the app as physical trauma event. Tuesday, 7 p.m., refused drops. Tuesday, 7:05 p.m., physical trauma event, blunt force to right kidney, administered by Monica. Tuesday, 7:10 p.m., drops ingested. It was a grim diary, but it kept me sane. It turned the torture into research. Then came the call that I had described in the beginning, the one where I drove through the snow to see Mason, but now, sitting in his office, looking at the final, verified report, the horror had a shape and a name. Mason projected the results onto the wall. "Brode facum," he said, pointing to the chemical structure that dominated the screen. "It is a second-generation anticoagulant. It is a superwarfarin. It blocks the vitamin K epoxide reductase enzyme. Basically, it stops your blood from being able to clot, at all." He clicked to the next slide. "And this," he said, pointing to a smaller spike, "is bromethalin. It affects the central nervous system. It causes the dizziness, the lethargy, the compliance. Everly, this is rat poison. High grade, commercial rat poison." I stared at the screen. The molecules looked almost beautiful in their complexity. Geometric spiders that were currently swimming through my veins. "And look at the timeline," Mason said, overlaying my app data with the blood concentration levels. It was a perfect match. The spikes in brodifacoum levels appeared in my blood exactly 2 to 3 hours after dinner. Every single night, the curve was undeniable. "She is poisoning you," Mason said, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. "And she is poisoning your father. That is why he had the heart attack. His blood is so thin that his heart is struggling to pump it. It is leaking through the vessel walls." I looked at the graph. I looked at the notes I had made. Physical trauma event. Suddenly, the last few weeks clicked into a terrifying focus. "The beatings," I whispered. "What?" Mason asked. "She hits me after dinner," I said, my voice sounding hollow. "She hits me specifically in the torso, the kidneys, the liver, the spleen." Mason turned pale. "Oh my God." "She knows," I said, the realization washing over me like ice water. "She knows the poison makes me bleed internally. She hits me to accelerate the damage. She hits me to create internal hematomas that won't clot. It is not just punishment, Mason. It is a catalyst. She is trying to kill me faster." I remembered her words. This is the price of ingratitude. It wasn't anger. It was mechanics. She was tenderizing meat. She was ensuring that the poison did its job by creating injuries that the body could not repair. "You are not going back there," Mason said firmly, reaching for his phone. "I am calling the police. Detective Cortez is working a case right now. 3 elderly patients in the county who died of unexplained hemorrhages. All of them had wellness consultants. This is serial. Everly, she is a predator." "No," I said, standing up. "Put the phone down." "Everly, are you insane? She is killing you." "If the police show up at the door tonight, what happens?" I asked, my voice steady despite the trembling of my hands. "She flushes the pills. She pours the liquid down the sink. She plays the victim. She claims I am mentally unstable, which she has been telling the neighbors for years. She claims I am anorexic and self-harming, without the physical evidence of the poison in her possession. It is my word against hers, and she is very, very good at lying." "We have your blood," Mason argued. "My blood proves I was poisoned," I countered. "It does not prove she gave it to me. She could argue I took it myself. She could argue it was an accident. I need more. I need the bottle. I need her on tape." "And your father?" Mason asked. "He is dying. Everly." "That is exactly why I need 2 more days," I said. "If the police storm in, the stress will kill him. Monica was right about that. His heart is hanging by a thread. I need to get him out, or I need to neutralize her in a way that doesn't cause him to go into cardiac arrest." "You are playing with your life," Mason said. "One bad fall, one hard hit, and you could bleed out into your brain." "I know," I said, "but I have the antidote now, right?" Mason sighed and opened a drawer. He pulled out a bottle of prescription-grade vitamin K1. "High dose. It will reverse the anticoagulant effects. Take this. Start immediately. It will buy you a shield. But it won't stop the bromethalin. You will still get dizzy. You will still be weak." I took the bottle and clutched it like a talisman. "I need to catch her," I said. "I need to see her lie one last time. I need to make sure that when she falls, she never gets up again." I drove back to Maple Ridge that night with the vitamin K pills hidden in my bra. I felt different. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating fury. I was no longer the victim. I was the researcher, and Monica was the subject. The next 48 hours were a high-stakes operation. I bought a micro camera that looked like a button and sewed it onto my cardigan. I bought a digital voice recorder and taped it to the underside of the dining table. I started collecting samples. When Monica turned her back to blend her morning smoothie, I used a pipette to steal 10 milliliters of the amber liquid from the unlabeled bottle on the counter. I transferred it to a sterile vial and hid it inside a hollowed-out tube of lipstick in my purse. I went into the bathroom and took photos of the bruises on my ribs, documenting the progression of color from purple to sickly yellow. I recorded everything. Thursday. Dinner. "Drink it, Everly." Monica's voice on the recording was smooth, maternal. "Do not make me count to 3. Sound of glass on wood. Sound of swallowing. Sound of a chair scraping back. Sound of a dull thud. There," she whispered. "That is for looking at me with those judgmental eyes. You think you are better than me? You are just a sick little girl." I listened to the playback in my car. Parked down the street. It was chilling. It was perfect. But the hardest part was the acting. I had to pretend the poison was still working. I had to feign the dizziness. I had to pretend to stumble. On Friday afternoon, I found my father sitting on the porch. He was wrapped in a blanket, looking out at the bare trees. "Evie," he said softly, "I feel so tired. I don't know if the protocol is working." I sat beside him and took his hand. His skin was paper thin. I could see the blue veins, the poison highways, beneath the surface. "It is going to be okay, Dad," I said, squeezing his hand gently. "We are going to have a celebration soon, a real dinner. I am going to take us to my place." "Your place?" he asked, confused. "The apartment?" "Something better," I said. "I have a surprise. Just hold on for me, okay? Just 2 more days." He nodded, trusting me, just as he trusted Monica. That trust broke my heart. I went back inside. Monica was in the kitchen, mixing a new batch of the amber liquid. She was humming a song. "You look better today," she said, eyeing me suspiciously. "Your color is better." My heart hammered against my ribs. The vitamin K was working. I was metabolizing the poison too fast. She noticed. "I feel terrible," I lied, leaning heavily against the island. "I threw up twice this morning. I think my body is rejecting it." Monica smiled, satisfied. "Good. That means the deep toxins are loosening. We need to increase the dosage tonight, just to be sure we get it all." "Okay," I said meekly. "Whatever you say, Monica." I went upstairs and texted Mason. "I have the sample. I have the recording. I am ready." Mason texted back. "Detective Cortez is briefed. He is ready to move when you are. Be careful." I looked at the phone. Then I walked to the window and looked out at the driveway where Monica's car was parked. "You want to increase the dosage?" I whispered to the glass. "Let's increase the stakes." I was done being the rat in her maze. It was time to become the exterminator. I had the data, I had the science. Now, I just needed the stage. And I knew exactly where to set it. The glass house on the cliff. The one place where there were no shadows for her to hide in. I packed my bag. The Last Supper was going to be served. But this time, I would be the one writing the menu. I walked into the Port Aurora Police Precinct, carrying a designer handbag that cost more than my first car, but inside, the only thing of value was a cheap, hollowed-out lipstick tube containing 10 milliliters of amber liquid. Detective Riley Cortez was waiting for me in a small, soundproof interrogation room. He was younger than I expected, with sharp, intelligent eyes and the weary posture of a man who had seen too much human cruelty. I placed the items on the metal table between us. The lipstick tube, the flash drive containing the recordings of Monica's threats, and the printout of the beta app data correlating the mealtimes with my blood toxicity levels. Riley picked up the lipstick tube with a gloved hand, holding it up to the light. "This is it?" he asked. "That is the dose she prepared for me yesterday morning," I said. "I managed to swap it with tea while she was yelling at the landscapers. If you run that against the toxicology report Mason sent you, I guarantee you will find a 99% match for brodifacoum and bromethylin." Riley set the tube down carefully. "We have been looking for a source like this for 6 months. We have 3 bodies, Everly, 3 elderly patients who died of massive internal hemorrhaging. All of them had wellness consultants managing their end-of-life care. All of them had depleted savings accounts. But we never found the poison. We assumed it was flushed." "She does not flush it," I said, my voice cold. "She feeds it to us. She makes us swallow the weapon so there is no evidence left in the bottle." Riley leaned forward, his expression hardening. "I can get a warrant with this. We can kick down her door in Maple Ridge tonight. We can save your father." "If you kick down the door," I said, repeating the fear that had been paralyzed me for days, "my father will have a cardiac event. His heart is functioning at 40% capacity. The shock of seeing SWAT teams and seeing his wife in handcuffs. It will kill him just as surely as the poison. I need to control the environment. I need him to see the truth. But I need him to see it in a place where he feels safe, surrounded by family, with medical help standing by." I laid out my plan. It was not a police raid. It was a dinner party. Riley listened, skepticism slowly turning into respect. He looked at the blueprints of my house on Silvercrest Lake, the house my family did not know existed. "You want to wire the place?" he asked. "I have already installed 4K resolution cameras in the molding of the kitchen and dining room," I explained. "The feeds run directly to a server in the back laboratory. I want you and a forensics team in that lab. You will see everything in real time. The moment she doses the drink, you will have the footage. The moment I secure the sample, you walk in." Riley nodded slowly. "It is risky. If she suspects anything, she might not do it." "She is a narcissist," I said. "She cannot help herself. If I give her an audience, she will perform." The next phase was the guest list. I picked up my phone and called my Aunt Harper. I had not spoken to her in 2 years, not since Monica had banned her from the house for bringing a lasagna to Thanksgiving. "Aunt Harper," I said when she answered. "It is Everly." There was a pause, and then a warmth I had missed desperately. "Evie? Oh, honey, are you okay? We heard Daniel was sick." "He is recovering," I said, "but we need to get him out of that house for a day. I am renting a cabin up by Silvercrest Lake. I want to host a dinner. For Dad. For you and Uncle Nolan. For the cousins." "A dinner?" Harper hesitated. Will she be there?" "Monica will be there," I admitted. "But this is my dinner, my rules, no detox, no lectures, just real food. I want Dad to remember what a real family meal feels like." "We will be there," Harper said, her voice fierce. "We would walk through fire to see Daniel away from her." Then came the hardest call. Monica. I waited until I knew she would be feeling superior, right after her morning yoga livestream. "Monica," I said, pitching my voice to sound deferential. "I have been thinking. You work so hard for Dad. You deserve a break. I rented a little place near the lake, just a cabin. I want to cook a thank you dinner for you and Dad. And I invited the aunts and uncles." "You invited Harper?" Monica sniffed. "That woman is a carbohydrate factory." "I know," I said, "but Dad misses them. And honestly, Monica, I think it would be good for them to see how well you have taken care of him. They think you are too strict. If they see him looking stable, it would prove them wrong. You could show them what true discipline looks like." I heard the pause. I heard her ego swelling. She did not want to come to a dinner I cooked, but she desperately wanted to gloat in front of the sisters-in-law who hated her. "Fine," she said, "but I am bringing my own water, and I will need to inspect the menu. We cannot have your father relapsing because you decided to serve butter." "Of course," I said. "It is just a small cabin, Monica, nothing fancy, but the view is nice." I hung up. The trap was set. 2 days later, my glass fortress on the cliff was transformed into a stage. I worked with Detective Riley's technical team to ensure there were no blind spots. We hid microphones in the floral centerpieces. We angled the high-definition cameras to capture the exact surface of the dining table and the kitchen island. "The resolution is high enough to read the text on a pill bottle," the tech guy told me, pointing to the monitors set up in my sterile white laboratory at the back of the house. Detective Riley stood next to the centrifuge, looking out of place in his tactical vest amidst my millions of dollars of scientific equipment. "You live here?" he asked, looking around at the gleaming chrome and glass. "Alone?" "I like the quiet," I said. "This isn't a cabin," he noted dryly. "No," I said, "it is not." I had hired a private chef, Jonas, a man who understood that food was love, not war. We designed a menu that was a direct rebellion against Monica's starvation regime. Roast beef with a red wine reduction. Roasted root vegetables glazed with honey and thyme. Freshly baked sourdough bread with salted butter. It was rich, nutrient-dense, and comforting. It smelled like safety. But the most important preparation happened at the wet bar. I took 6 crystal water glasses. They were heavy, expensive, and etched with delicate patterns. To the naked eye, they were identical, but on the base of one glass, I had used a diamond-tipped engraver to make a tiny, rough scratch. "This is the target glass," I told Riley, holding it up. "This is the one I will ensure ends up at my place setting. When she adds the drops, she will put them in this glass. If I switch glasses, or if there is any confusion, look for the scratch on the feed." "And if she brings her own cup?" Riley asked. "She won't," I said. "She likes to hide her poison in plain sight. Using her own cup draws attention. Putting drops in a crystal goblet makes it look like a high-end supplement. It makes it look legitimate." I spent the afternoon arranging the table. It was a strategic battlefield. I placed my father in the center, the seat of honor. On his right, I put Aunt Harper. On his left, Uncle Nolan. I wanted him flanked by people who had loved him since before he was broken. I wanted him to feel their warmth, their laughter, their solid, undemanding presence. I put myself across from him. "And Monica?" I placed her at the far end of the table, the head of the table, technically, but in this configuration, it was an island. She would be visually separated from the cluster of family. She would have to shout to be heard over the laughter. She would feel her control slipping with every passing minute. And when a narcissist loses control, they escalate. Riley gathered his team in the lab an hour before the guests were due to arrive. "All right," he said. "Rules of engagement. We are watching the feed. We are waiting for the subject, Monica Richards, to administer an unknown substance to the victim's food or drink. We need clear visual confirmation of the act. Once she does it, and once she presents the drink to Everly, we move. We do not let Everly drink it. We secure the glass. We secure the subject. We secure the father." He turned to me. "Everly, you are the bait, but you are also the trigger man. If you feel unsafe, if she gets violent, you say the safe word. Salt. You say, 'Please pass the salt,' and we come in. Understood?" "Understood," I said. I went to my bedroom to dress. I chose a dress I had bought in Paris, a structure of navy silk that made me feel like armor. I put on my heels. I applied lipstick. I walked out to the main living area. The sun was setting over Silvercrest Lake, casting long, bloody shadows across the water. The pines stood like silent sentinels on the ridge. The house was breathtaking, a monument to everything I had achieved despite her. But tonight, it wasn't a home. It was a courtroom. I walked to the vast wall of glass that looked out over the drop. I pressed my hand against the cold surface. Below me, the water churned, dark and deep. I thought about the 12-year-old girl who had weighed her lettuce. I thought about the 16-year-old who had eaten apple slices for her birthday. I thought about the bruises on my ribs that were currently fading under the silk of my dress. "Lies," I whispered to the reflection of my own eyes in the glass. It was all lies. She had told me I was sick so she could be the healer. She had told me I was weak so she could be the crutch. She had told me I was unlovable so she could be the only one who would tolerate me. "No more," I said, my voice gaining strength. I turned away from the window and looked at the kitchen. The cameras were blinking their tiny, invisible red lights. The trap was primed. "Tonight," I said to the empty room, "we do not count calories. We count crimes, and the person who has to pay the bill is the one who did it in the name of health." I heard the crunch of tires on the gravel driveway. The headlights swept across the ceiling. They were here. I took a deep breath, smoothed my dress, and walked to the front door to welcome the woman who had tried to murder me, and the father I was about to break in order to save. The arrival of my family at the glass house was a study in contrasts. The first car to pull up was Aunt Harper's battered minivan. She stepped out, wrapped in a bright, colorful scarf, and stopped dead in her tracks. She looked up at the cantilevered steel beams, the floor-to-ceiling glass that reflected the sunset, and the sheer, brutal elegance of the structure. "Good Lord," she breathed as I opened the massive pivot door. "Evie, this is the cabin?" "It is a little more than a cabin, Aunt Harper," I said, hugging her. She smelled of vanilla and rain, a scent that instantly transported me back to the few happy Christmases before Monica. My cousins, Jake and Sarah, tumbled out of the car, their eyes wide. They immediately pulled out their phones, snapping photos of the view, the architecture, the way the light hit the water below. "You built this?" Uncle Nolan asked, shaking my hand with a grip that was firm and honest. "You did this all by yourself?" "I had some help with the construction," I joked, "but the design and the means came from my work." "You built a whole life," Aunt Harper said softly, touching my face. "You built a whole world, and you never told us." Then, the second car arrived, Monica's pristine white SUV. My father stepped out first. He looked frail against the backdrop of the imposing house. He leaned on his cane, squinting at the glass. When he saw me, his face broke into a smile that was both proud and heartbreakingly confused. "Evie?" he asked, his voice thin. "You live here?" "Welcome home, Dad," I said, Monica emerged from the driver's side. She was wearing a beige cashmere ensemble that looked expensive but severe. She carried a large tote bag, her survival kit, no doubt. She scanned the house not with awe, but with the cold, calculating gaze of an inspector looking for code violations. "Well," she said, her heels clicking on the concrete walkway, "it is certainly modern, very sterile, lots of sharp edges. Be careful. Daniel, do not trip." She walked past me without a hug, her eyes darting to the kitchen, assessing the equipment, the surfaces, the lack of visible clutter. "It looks like a laboratory," she sniffed. "It is," I said, "partially." The dinner began in a way I had not experienced in 16 years. We sat around the long, reclaimed wood table I had brought in for the occasion. The smell of Jonas's roast beef filled the air, rich, savory, and unapologetically hearty. There was no kale, there was no quinoa, there were potatoes roasted in duck fat, there were green beans sautéed with garlic and bacon. For the first 20 minutes, the tension was palpable. Monica sat stiffly at her end of the table, picking at a green bean as if it were radioactive. But the rest of the family? They dove in. "This is incredible," Jake said with his mouth full. "Evie, did you cook this?" "I have a chef tonight," I said, smiling at Jonas, who was discreetly managing the service from the open kitchen. "But I approved the menu, every calorie." Monica cleared her throat. "Careful with the potatoes. Daniel, nightshades cause inflammation. You know what we talked about regarding your joints?" "Oh, let him eat." "Monica," Aunt Harper said, her voice cheerful but sharp. She reached over and put another spoonful of potatoes on Dad's plate. "Look at him. He is smiling. Happiness is the best anti-inflammatory, isn't it?" Dad looked at the potatoes. Then he looked at Monica. Then he looked at me. "It looks delicious," he said quietly, and took a bite. Monica's lips thinned into a white line, but she said nothing. As the wine flowed, a deep, rich Cabernet for the guests, filtered water for Monica, the atmosphere shifted. The heavy blanket of Monica's control began to fray. Uncle Nolan started telling stories about when he and Dad were kids, racing homemade go-karts down Miller's Hill. They laughed about the time Dad crashed into a pig pen and smelled like manure for a week. "I remember that," Dad chuckled, his eyes lighting up. "Mom made me sleep in the barn." "And she hosed you down in the yard," Aunt Harper roared with laughter. For the first time in years, my father wasn't the sick patient. He wasn't the fragile heart case. He was Daniel. He was a brother. He was a man with a history that predated green juice and vitamin drips. Monica sat in silence. She tried to interject a few times. "Stress is bad for his cortisol levels," or "laughter can trigger asthma." But no one was listening. She was being erased from the narrative. She was no longer the protagonist of the family. She was just a guest, and an annoying one at that. I watched her from across the table. I saw the panic rising in her eyes. She was losing her grip. She needed to reassert dominance. She needed to remind everyone, especially me and Dad, that she held the keys to our survival. "Excuse me," Monica said abruptly, standing up. "I need to get my water. This tap water tastes like chlorine." She walked toward the kitchen island, her tote bag slung over her shoulder. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. I glanced at the ceiling where the camera was hidden. "Are you watching, Riley?" I kept the conversation going. "So, Uncle Nolan, tell me about the fishing trip in '89. "Oh, that was a disaster," Nolan laughed. "Your dad dropped the tackle box in the lake." While they laughed, I watched Monica out of the corner of my eye. She stood at the island, her back partially to the room, but fully visible to the camera angled above the stove. She reached into her bag. Her hand came out holding a small, brown glass vial. It was the size of an essential oil bottle. She looked over her shoulder. The family was engrossed in the story. I pretended to be laughing, looking at my uncle. She moved quickly. She uncapped the vial. She reached for the water glass that was sitting on the counter, the crystal goblet with the tiny scratch on the base. Drip, drip, drip. 3 distinct drops of amber liquid fell into the water. They swirled and vanished, dissolving instantly. She recapped the bottle and slipped it back into her bag. She picked up the glass, swirled it gently, and composed her face into a mask of maternal concern. She walked back to the table. "Here, Everly," she said, her voice cutting through the laughter like a knife. She placed the glass in front of me. "I poured you some fresh water. You looked a little flushed. Hydration is key, you know." The table went quiet. The intrusion of her wellness persona was jarring. "Thank you, Monica," I said, staring at the glass. The water looked perfectly clear. It looked innocent. "Drink up," she urged, smiling sweetly. "It is good for your blood, keeps the circulation moving." My father looked at me. "Listen to her, Evie. She knows best." I reached for the glass. My fingers brushed the cool crystal. I felt the tiny scratch on the base. This was it. The weapon was in my hand. "You are right, Monica," I said, lifting the glass. "To health." Monica's eyes were locked on the rim of the glass. She was hungry for it. She wanted to see me swallow it. She wanted the satisfaction of knowing that even in my $90 million house, she could still force me to drink poison. Just as the glass touched my lips, the front door chime echoed through the house. Everyone jumped. "Expecting someone?" Uncle Nolan asked. "Oh," I said, setting the glass down, unsipped. "That must be my colleague. He was running late." I stood up and walked to the door. I opened it to reveal Detective Riley Cortez. He wasn't in uniform. He was wearing a sharp gray suit, looking every bit the part of a high-end biotech executive, but his eyes were alert, scanning the room. "So sorry I'm late," Riley said, his voice booming with practiced charm. "Traffic on the bridge was a nightmare. Everly, forgive me." "Everyone," I said, turning to the table. "This is Riley. He is a consultant for Hemisphere Analytics. He helps us with data security." "Nice to meet you," Riley said, walking over to the table. He shook hands with my father, then Uncle Nolan. When he got to Monica, he paused. "And you must be Monica. Everly has told me so much about your dedication to health." Monica preened slightly. "Well, I try. Someone has to look out for this family." "Indeed," Riley said. He remained standing by the table, his eyes drifting to the glass in front of me. "Everly, before I forget, I brought that portable spectrometer you wanted to test for the new liquid analysis protocol." "Oh, right," I said, playing along. "Is that water?" Riley asked, pointing to my poisoned glass. "Perfect. Can I borrow it? I need a control sample to calibrate the lens. It will just take a second in the lab." Monica stiffened. "It is just water," she said quickly. "Why do you need to test it?" "Science never sleeps, ma'am." Riley grinned, picking up the glass. "We are calibrating for purity. Everly is obsessed with water quality, aren't you?" "I am," I said, meeting Monica's gaze. "I want to know exactly what is in everything I consume." Monica looked nervous. Her eyes darted from the glass in Riley's hand to her bag. "Well, do not take too long. She needs to hydrate." "I will be right back," Riley said. "Do not let the roast beef get cold." He turned and walked toward the back of the kitchen, disappearing into the hallway that led to the lab. He took the glass, and the evidence, with him. I sat back down. My heart was pounding so hard I thought my chest would crack. "Who is he?" Aunt Harper whispered. "He is handsome." "Just a work friend," I said. I looked at Monica. She was shifting in her seat. She took a sip of her own water. She looked uneasy. She sensed something was wrong, but she couldn't figure out what. Why would a data guy want to test a glass of water? "So, Monica," I said, leaning forward, my voice steady. "Tell Aunt Harper about the protocol you have Dad on, the one with the drops. I was telling her how amazing it is that you mix them yourself." Monica blinked. "Oh, well, it is complex. It is a blend of ancient roots, ashwagandha, turmeric, things that Big Pharma doesn't want you to know about." "And the amber liquid?" I asked. The one you just put in my water? Silence. I did not put anything in your water, Monica said, her voice pitching up slightly. I just poured you water. I saw you, I said calmly. I saw you take a bottle out of your bag and pour 3 drops. You are imagining things, Monica laughed, a brittle, high sound. Daniel, she is hallucinating again. See? I told you, the toxins are affecting her brain. I saw it too, Aunt Harper said suddenly. Monica whipped her head around. Excuse me? I saw you, Harper said, frowning. I thought it was flavor drops. Or lemon. You definitely put something in there. Monica. I did no such thing, Monica snapped. You are all ganging up on me. Daniel, are you going to let them talk to me like this? My father looked distressed. Monica. Honey, if you put vitamins in, just say so. It is fine. I did not put anything in, she shrieked, standing up. I am the only person here who cares about health. I am the only one trying to save you. And this is the thanks I get? Accusations? At that moment, the door to the lab opened. Riley walked back in. He was no longer smiling. He wasn't holding the glass. He was holding a piece of paper, a printout, and behind him, 2 uniformed officers walked into the open-concept living room. Monica froze. What is this? She whispered. Everly? Sit down. Monica, Riley said, his voice dropping the consultant act entirely. We need to talk about the water, and we need to talk about the brodifacoum. The what? Dad asked, his voice trembling. Rat poison. Mr. Richards, Riley said, placing the paper on the table in front of my father. Your wife just tried to feed your daughter a lethal dose of rat poison. Monica lunged for her bag. Do not touch it, Riley shouted, his hand going to his belt. The room exploded into chaos. Aunt Harper screamed. Uncle Nolan stood up to shield Dad, but I stayed seated. I watched Monica. I watched the mask fall. It is a lie, she screamed, her face twisting into something ugly and unrecognizable. It is her data. She manipulates the numbers. She is trying to frame me. We have it on video. Monica, I said quietly. We have you pouring it. We have the chemical analysis of the water, and we have my blood. I looked at my father. He was staring at the paper, then at his wife, his face draining of color. Monica, he whispered, tell me it is not true. She looked at him. For a second, I thought she might beg. I thought she might cry. But she didn't. She looked at him with pure, unadulterated contempt. You were dying anyway. Daniel, she spat. I just sped it up. You were weak. You were a drain. I was cleaning up the mess. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the kind of silence that usually follows a gunshot, a vacuum where the air itself feels too heavy to breathe. Monica's cruel words, I was cleaning up the mess, hung in the space between us like a physical barrier. My father sat frozen, his hand halfway to his mouth, his eyes wide and unseeing, as if his brain had simply refused to process the sentence his wife had just spoken. Riley walked back to the table. He did not look at Monica. He looked at my father. In his hand, he held a fresh printout, the ink still warm from the printer in the lab. Mr. Richards, Riley said, his voice low and respectful, devoid of the charming consultant persona he had worn minutes ago. I need you to look at this. He placed the paper on the table, right next to the thick envelope containing my medical records. It was a graph, a stark, jagged line of black ink rising into a sharp peak. This is the mass spectrometry analysis of the water your wife just handed to your daughter, Riley explained. The machine in the back is a portable mass spec, calibrated for high-speed toxicology. It breaks down liquid into its molecular components. He pointed to the highest peak on the graph. This spike represents brodifacoum. It is a superwarfarin, a potent, long-acting anticoagulant. In layman's terms, it destroys the body's ability to clot blood. It causes internal bleeding that does not stop. It is the active ingredient in the most aggressive rat poisons on the market. My father's gaze drifted from the paper to the crystal glass of water that still sat in the center of the table, looking innocent and clear. Riley then reached for the envelope I had provided earlier. He pulled out the analysis of my blood from the week before, the data Mason had compiled. He laid it directly over the new printout. The room gasped. Even Uncle Nolan, who knew nothing about chemistry, could see it. The patterns were identical. The spike in the water glass aligned perfectly with the spike in my bloodstream. It was like matching a key to a lock. "The concentration in the water is high," Riley continued, his voice tightening. "If Everly had drunk this glass, combined with the levels already in her system from previous doses, she would likely have suffered a cerebral hemorrhage within 48 hours. She would have gone to sleep and never woken up. It would have looked like a tragic, natural aneurysm." I stood up. My legs felt solid. My hands were steady. For the first time in my life, I was not afraid of the woman at the end of the table. I was the prosecutor, and she was the defendant. "Dad," I said, keeping my voice calm, anchoring him with my eyes. "Do you remember the dizziness I complained about last week? Do you remember the nosebleed I had on the sofa? The one Monica said was just a detox symptom?" Dad nodded slowly, tears pooling in his eyes. "That was not detox," I said. "That was my capillaries bursting. Every time I came home for dinner, every time I drank the amber drops she put in my cup, my blood grew thinner. I was bleeding from the inside out. And the reason I was bruising so badly?" I looked at Monica. She was sitting rigid in her chair, her face a mask of white rage, her hands gripping the edge of the table until her knuckles were colorless. "The bruises were not because I am clumsy," I said. "They were because she hit me. She waited until 2 hours after dinner, when the absorption rate was highest, and she struck me in the kidneys, in the spleen, in the liver. She was using physical force to create internal wounds that she knew my blood could not heal." "Liar!" Monica shrieked. The sound was so sudden, so piercing, that Aunt Harper flinched. "She is a liar, Daniel. She has always been jealous of me. She is trying to ruin us." "We do not have to rely on words, Monica," I said. "We have data." I picked up a remote control from the console table. I pointed it at the large, flat-screen television mounted on the glass wall. "I told you I like to know what is in everything I consume," I said. "That includes the truth." I pressed play. The screen flickered to life. It showed a high-definition, overhead view of the kitchen island, filmed from the camera hidden in the molding just 10 minutes ago. The image was crystal clear. It showed Monica standing by the counter. It showed her looking over her shoulder to ensure we were distracted. It showed her reaching into her bag. It showed the small brown bottle. It showed her uncapping it. And then, in terrifying 4K resolution, it showed 3 drops of liquid falling into the crystal glass. The room watched in horrified silence. On the screen, Monica swirled the glass, checked the clarity, and then smiled. A small, satisfied smirk that made my skin crawl. I paused the video on that smile. "That is not herbal tea, Monica," I said. "That is attempted murder." Monica stood up. Knocking her chair back, it clattered loudly onto the polished concrete floor. "It is herbal oil," she insisted, her eyes darting around the room, looking for an exit, looking for an ally. "It is a proprietary blend. You cannot prove what is in that bottle. I threw it away." "You put it back in your bag," Riley corrected her. "And we have a warrant." Riley signaled to the officers. One of them stepped forward and placed a document on the table. "Monica Richards," Riley said, his tone formal and cold. "This is a search warrant for your residence in Maple Ridge and your vehicle. But we did not just find the bottle in your bag. We found your supply closet." He pulled out a tablet and tapped the screen, casting a new image onto the television. It was a photo of the locked cabinet in our kitchen at home. The one Monica always said contained cleaning supplies that were too dangerous for us to touch. The photo showed shelves lined not with bleach, but with boxes of commercial rodenticide. There were vials of liquid extracted from the pellets. There were syringes. And on the bottom shelf, there was a ledger. We found a notebook, Riley said. It lists names, dates, dosages. He swiped to the next photo. It was a page from the notebook, written in Monica's distinctive, looping handwriting. Client: Mrs. Higgins. Dosage: 4 milliliters. A status: hospitalized. Result: heart failure. Client: Mr. Henderson. Dosage: 5 milliliters. A status: deceased. Subject: Daniel. Dosage: 2 ml. Status: maintenance. Subject: Everly. Dosage: 6 ml. Status: accelerating. My father made a sound that was half sob, half gasp. He slumped forward, clutching his chest. "Dad!" I moved to run to him, but Uncle Nolan was already there, holding him up. "I am okay," Dad wheezed, waving me off, his eyes fixed on Monica. "I am okay. I just need to hear her say it." He looked at his wife, the woman he had defended for 16 years, the woman he had let starve his daughter. "Monica," he whispered, his voice broken into 1,000 pieces. "What did you do to my little girl?" Monica looked at him. The facade crumbled completely. There was no more sweet stepmother. There was no more wellness guru. There was only a cornered, vicious animal. "I fixed her," she screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. "Look at her. Look at her success. She was a fat, lazy, sloppy child. She was nothing. I carved her out of dough. I gave her discipline. I gave her fear. Fear is the only thing that makes people better." "You poisoned her," Dad said, his voice gaining a terrifying strength. "You poisoned me." "I was purifying you," Monica yelled, her face red and distorted. "You were all so weak, so full of toxins. You needed to be stripped down. I was the only one with the courage to do it. I controlled the food because you were too stupid to control yourselves. I controlled the pain because you were too soft to endure it." She turned to me, her eyes wild. "You think you won?" she hissed. "You think this money, this house makes you better than me? You are still just the scared little girl eating apple slices on her birthday. You are nothing without my voice in your head." "No," I said. I picked up the blood test result, the paper that proved she had been killing me. I held it up like a shield. "I am not scared anymore. Monica," I said, "and I am not hearing your voice. I am hearing the data, and the data says you are done." I looked at Riley. "Get her out of my house." Riley nodded to the officers. "Monica Richards, you are under arrest for the attempted murder of Everly Richards, the attempted murder of Daniel Richards, and multiple counts of aggravated assault." The officers moved in. They grabbed Monica's arms. She fought them. She didn't go quietly. She thrashed and kicked, knocking over a vase of flowers. The water spilled across the table, mixing with the spilled wine, looking like blood. "Get off me," she shrieked. "I am a healer. I am a visionary. You are all filthy. You are all toxic." As they dragged her toward the door, she locked eyes with me one last time. "I made you," she screamed, the sound echoing off the glass walls. "I made you perfect." "No," I said, my voice quiet but carrying across the room. "You made me bleeding. I made myself perfect." They dragged her out into the night. We could hear her screaming even after the heavy front door slammed shut. "I only wanted you clean. I only wanted you clean." The silence rushed back into the room. But this time, it wasn't heavy. It was the silence of a storm that had finally broken. My father sat at the table, his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Uncle Nolan had his arm around him. Aunt Harper was crying openly, clutching a napkin. I walked over to my father. I knelt beside his chair. I did not touch him at first. I waited. He lowered his hands. His face was aged 10 years in 10 minutes. He looked at me, and I saw the shame burning in his eyes. "Evie," he whispered, I let her do it. I thought she loved us." "I know, Dad," I said softly. "She was very good at making poison taste like love." "I failed you," he choked out. "I should have protected you. I should have seen the bruises. I should have fed you pizza. I should have—" He broke down again, leaning his forehead against my shoulder. I wrapped my arms around him. He felt frail, but he was alive. His heart was beating against my chest, a rhythm that was weak, but steady. "You are safe now," I said. "We are both safe." I looked up at the others. Aunt Harper and Uncle Nolan were watching us, their faces full of sorrow and relief. I stood up and walked to the wall where the blood test results were still pinned to the corkboard I had set up for Riley. I took the paper down. I turned back to my father. "Dad," I said, "do not apologize for the past. We cannot change the data points that have already been plotted, but we can change the trend line." I held up the paper. "She used to say that my blood was dirty. She used to say I was a burden on your heart. But look at this." I tapped the graph. "This is the truth. I used my blood, the blood she called toxic, to catch her. I used the science she mocked to save your life. I did not do this to kill her. Dad, I did it to keep you." I walked over to the kitchen counter and picked up the crystal glass, the one Monica had poisoned. The police had left it for evidence bagging, but for a moment, it sat there, catching the light. I looked at the amber tint in the water. "She wanted to be the architect of our lives," I said to the room. "She wanted to build us into something empty and hollow, but she forgot one thing about architecture." I looked at the steel beams of my house, the glass walls that held back the wind and the cold. "If you build on a foundation of lies," I said, "eventually, the structure collapses, but if you build on the truth, even if it hurts, it stands." I turned to Riley, who was standing by the door, watching us with a grim expression. "Take the glass," I said. "Take the video. Take it all. I am done with it." Riley nodded and signaled the tech team to begin packing up the evidence. I turned back to my family. The roast beef was cold. The wine was spilled. The evening was a disaster by any social standard. But as I looked at my father, who was wiping his eyes and taking a deep, shuddering breath of air that didn't smell of essential oils and fear, I knew it was the best dinner we had ever had. "Is anyone still hungry?" I asked, a small, tired smile touching my lips. "Because I think there is some ice cream in the freezer, real ice cream, full fat, with chocolate chips." My father looked up. A faint spark returned to his eyes. "Chocolate chips?" he asked, his voice rough. "The best kind," I said. "I think," he said, reaching for my hand, "that sounds like exactly what the doctor ordered." The weeks that followed Monica's arrest were a blur of flashing cameras, legal depositions, and headlines that made my stomach turn. The local papers dubbed it the wellness poisoning scandal, running sensational stories about the killer coach and her house of horrors. They interviewed neighbors who suddenly remembered hearing screams they had never reported. They dug up Monica's past, finding a trail of bankruptcies and other elderly clients who had died under mysterious circumstances. But that part of the story, the police procedural, the court dates, the eventual trial where she would scream her innocence until the judge banged the gavel, is not what matters to me. That is public record. You can read about it in the archives. What matters, the true ending of this story, happened the afternoon after the arrest. It was a Tuesday. The sun was setting over Silvercrest Lake, casting long, golden fingers of light through the glass walls of my fortress. The house was quiet. The police tape had been removed from the dining table. The forensic team had packed up their gear. The only evidence that a crime had taken place was the lingering smell of cleaning fluid where the vase had shattered. My father, Daniel, was sitting in one of the leather armchairs facing the window. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him, without Monica's constant hovering, without her energy filling the room. He seemed to have deflated. He was holding a cup of coffee, real coffee, with cream, which I had made him. He held it with both hands, staring into the dark liquid as if it were a scrying pool. I walked in and sat on the sofa opposite him. I did not speak. I let the silence stretch. I knew he needed to be the one to break it. "I was afraid," he said finally. His voice was rough, like gravel grinding against stone. "Afraid of what?" I asked. "Of dying?" "Of being alone," he admitted. looking up at me. His eyes were red-rimmed and hollow. "After your mother died, the silence in that house was so loud. Evie, it rang in my ears. Then Monica came along. She was loud. She was colorful. She had plans. She had rules. It felt like safety. I thought if I just followed her rules, the silence wouldn't come back." "So you let her make the rules," I said, "even when the rules hurt." He flinched. "I thought she was helping you. She said you were out of control. She said you needed structure. I told myself it was just a diet. I told myself she was just strict." "Dad," I said, leaning forward, "you are a mechanic. You know how things work. If an engine is making a knocking sound, do you ignore it and hope it goes away? Or do you open the hood?" He looked down at his coffee. "I ignored the knocking." "You did not just ignore it," I said, my voice rising slightly, not with anger, but with the necessity of truth. "You turned up the radio so you wouldn't have to hear it. Do you want to know what happened after dinner, Dad, every single night?" He shook his head slightly, a reflexive denial, but I did not stop. "She would wait until you went to the living room," I said. "She would wait until the TV was on, and then she would corner me, sometimes by the sink, sometimes in the pantry, and she would hit me." I pulled up the sleeve of my sweater, revealing a fading yellow bruise on my upper arm. "She didn't use an open hand," I continued. "She used her elbow. She used her fist. She aimed for the soft spots, the kidneys, the stomach. She told me that if I made a sound, if I cried out, it would stress your heart. She told me that my voice would kill you." Daniel began to weep. It was a quiet, ugly sound. His shoulders shook with the force of his shame. "She used your life as a weapon against me," I said relentlessly. "She told me that my blood was toxic to you. She made me believe that my existence was a threat to your survival. And you? You sat in the other room and thanked her for the tea." "I am so sorry," he choked out. "Evie, I am so sorry. I was a coward. I was a lazy, terrified coward. I let her take the wheel because I didn't want to drive anymore." "I know," I said, "but saying sorry doesn't fix the engine. Dad, you have to rebuild it." He looked at me then, really looked at me. He saw the woman I had become, the scientist, the survivor, the person who had built a multi-million-dollar company in a fortress on a cliff while he was drinking green sludge and hiding from the world. "What do I do?" he asked. "Tell me what to do. I will do anything." "First," I said, "you stop being a passenger in your own life. Monica is gone. She is never coming back. You have to make your own decisions now. You have to decide what you eat. You have to decide what doctors you see. You have to decide who you are without her." I reached into the folder on the coffee table and pulled out a copy of the toxicology report, the graph with the 2 identical spikes of poison. "And second," I said, sliding the paper across the table toward him, "you have to accept this." He looked at the jagged lines. "This is the truth," I said. "This is not an opinion. This is not a he said, she said. This is chemistry. She was killing us, both of us. She was thinning our blood until we were transparent. You have to look at this. Dad, you have to really see it. Because if you ever let anyone treat you like a project instead of a person again, I won't be there to save you." He picked up the paper. His hands were shaking, but he held it. "I promise," he whispered. "I promise, Evie." Then, he did something that surprised me. He reached for his phone. He dialed the number for the Port Aurora Police Precinct. "This is Daniel Richards," he said into the phone, his voice gaining a shred of strength. "I want to make a statement. I want to waive my medical privacy rights. You can have all my records. You can have the bank statements. I want to tell you everything I saw, everything I ignored." I watched him. It was a small step, but it was a step. He was taking the wheel back. Later that evening, the gravel driveway crunched with the sound of tires again. It wasn't the police. It wasn't lawyers. It was Aunt Harper's minivan. She walked in carrying a casserole dish the size of a suitcase, covered in aluminum foil. Uncle Nolan followed with a cooler full of soda and beer. My cousins, Jake and Sarah, brought bags of chips and a chocolate cake. "We figured," Aunt Harper said, setting the steaming dish on the kitchen island, "that you two had enough of wellness for one lifetime. Tonight, we eat lasagna with extra cheese and sausage and absolutely no kale." The smell of tomato sauce and melted mozzarella filled the glass house, chasing away the sterile scent of the laboratory. It smelled like warmth. It smelled like forgiveness. We sat around the table again, the same table where, 24 hours ago, I had exposed a murderer, but tonight, the atmosphere was different. There was no tension. There was no fear. No one was watching my plate to see how much I took. No one was judging my father for reaching for a second dinner roll. I took a bite of the lasagna. It was rich, salty, and greasy in the most beautiful way possible. It tasted like childhood before the scale. "This is amazing, Aunt Harper," I said. "It is just food, honey," she smiled. "It is meant to feed you, not fix you." My father sat at the head of the table. He was eating slowly, savoring every bite. He was laughing at Uncle Nolan's jokes. He looked frail. Yes, the poison had taken a toll that would take months, maybe years, to repair. But his eyes were clear. The fog of fear had lifted. "Evie," he said, catching my eye across the table. He raised his glass of soda. "To boundaries." I raised my glass of wine. "To boundaries." After dinner, while the cousins were clearing the plates and arguing over who got the last piece of cake, I walked into the kitchen. I had the framed copy of my blood test results in my hand. Most people hang art in their homes. They hang landscapes or portraits. I took a hammer and a nail, and I hung the graph on the wall right next to the refrigerator. It was a stark, black and white reminder. 2 spikes, 2 poisons, 1 truth. Aunt Harper walked up behind me. She looked at the frame. "A little grim for kitchen decor, isn't it?" she asked. "It is a reminder," I said, adjusting the frame so it was perfectly straight. "I never want to forget what happens when you mistake control for love. I never want to forget that the data saved me when my heart wanted to surrender." She squeezed my shoulder. "You are a tough cookie, Everly Richards." "I had to be," I said. I walked out onto the deck. The night air was cold, biting with the promise of snow. I looked out over the lake. The water was black and still, reflecting the lights of the houses on the opposite shore. I thought about Monica, sitting in a cell somewhere, probably complaining about the toxins in the prison food, probably telling the guards that she was only trying to help them be better versions of themselves. She would never change. People like her never do. They are the heroes of their own twisted stories until the end. But I had changed. I looked at my hands. They were steady. My side still ached where she had hit me last. But the bruise was fading. My blood was clotting. My heart was pumping strong, clean, unpoisoned blood through my veins. I had built a fortress to keep the world out. But in the end, I had to let the world in to save myself. I had to trust Riley. I had to trust Mason. I had to trust my family. And most of all, I had to trust the one thing that had never lied to me: the data. I leaned against the railing, feeling the cold steel against my palms. This brings us to the end of my file, the end of the case study. But before I close the log, I have a question for you. We all have people in our lives who claim to know what is best for us. People who say they are hurting us for our own good. People who serve us criticism on a plate and call it love. If you are sitting at that table right now, staring at a plate of good intentions that tastes like poison, what will you do? Option A. Do you stay seated? Do you swallow the bitterness and tell yourself that they must be right because they say they love you? Do you let them starve you until you disappear? Or option B. Do you look at the data? Do you look at your own bruises, the physical ones, the emotional ones, and realize that love does not leave a mark? Do you stand up, push the plate away, and walk out the door, even if it means walking alone? I looked down at the dark water of the lake. A single light from my house reflected on the surface, cutting through the blackness like a laser. My blood told the truth, I whispered to the night. It screamed when I was too afraid to speak. Now, it is your turn. Listen to your own data, because if you look closely enough, the truth is always there, running through your veins. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment down below and share your thoughts on Everly's Choice. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help more people hear this story.